Hello everybody, this is your buddy Smokin Mo over here. We're going to talk today about doing some spare ribs. We're going to take these spare ribs and cut them down into some nice St. Louis cut ribs. We're also going to take the membranes off the back of them and get them ready for the smoker that's heating up out in the backyard right now. So before we get started, we want to talk about a few things that we want to get together before we even go any further. You always want to have your rubber gloves. You want to have your assortment of knives, your butter knife, your 9-inch. I have all this stuff ready before I even get started. Because the last thing you want to do is open up this package of ribs and have blood and everything else all over the place only to stop what you're doing and have to run back in the house. So have your cutting board ready, your paper towels, your knives, and your pan that you're going to put your ribs in after you're done cutting them. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so we have a package of IBP ribs here. We got at our local market. Before I get started, I want to get my gloves put on because it sure keeps that mess, all that bloody mess, to a minimum. I just pull my gloves off, throw them in the trash, and we're ready to go on to our next step. Okay, so typically what I'll do is I'll get my little boning knife out and pull these ribs up high. I'll tear this package a little bit. I'll set these right in this pan right here. Okay, so we'll take our first rack of ribs. Again, this is a rack of spare ribs. They're looking a little bit hammered on the back, a little bit of fat and things. We'll cut all that and get it out of the way. You'll notice that there's a flap on the back of these spare ribs, and I'll turn that a little sideways so you can see it. Your baby back ribs do not have this flap, so you don't have to worry about it when you're doing it. So you get your boning knife out. I'll trim that little piece off. And just come in from the front side here. That way you don't mar up the back of your ribs. Because after you cook these things, you'll see where the butcher's got a hold of this a little bit. You will see every one of these imperfections after you've cooked your ribs. So this thing right here has meat on one side and that white membrane skin on the other side. We'll throw that on the cooker, and after about 2 hours, this will be a nice little piece of meat. This will tell you exactly where your ribs are, salt-wise, sweet-wise, smoke-wise. So when you eat this little piece right here, you'll know you're on track if you got a good tasting little piece of flat meat. All right, so what we'll do next is we'll just I'll pull a little bit of this fat meat off of here. Take your knife, try and cut away from you at all times. We don't have time for an accident, that's for sure. We want to spend the day barbecuing, not in the emergency room. So I'll just kind of get that knife under there and get these kind of cleaned up. Boy, these got a lot of fat on them. Okay. All right, now that we got these pretty close right now. What I like to do is I typically like to cut the rib into a St. Louis to start with. That way I only have to pull this membrane off of the section that I really like to use. This other hard brisket in right here, we'll put that on the smoker, but 9 times out of 10 we'll chop this thing up real good and throw it into a pot of beans or chili or something like that. It makes a really good base for chili. So what you want to do is count about 4 bones back. You're going to see this longest bone in here, and that's the bone that's going to direct us for our cut all the way across this St. Louis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is the longest bone. We'll set our knife up, and we'll kind of take a look right down this thing. We want a nice, even cut, and you could do this just like I'm doing with my fingers. Sets that first line up. And that was a good cut right there. Okay. Now we just take this. You can see what's left over. And we'll throw that on the smoker along with these. So now what we'll do is we'll take, you'll see this real fatty kind of end meat here. What I like to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 bones here. And I'll take these and I'll cut this piece off also. So now what we've got are 2 cuts, and that's what your St. Louis rack looks like now. Nice and clean. It will cook very evenly now that it's cut down into a rack like that. All right, so we'll take this, get that out of our way. Now we'll take our butter knife, and here's our last end big bone. Don't go from the other end or you'll have a whole long time of doing it. And we'll take our butter knife and just slide it under that membrane back here. And this one's got kind of a different membrane. It's cut a little different. I'll go to the second bone back and see why we use a butter knife. It gets well underneath that membrane without cutting it. All right, and so what we'll do, we'll take our paper towel, fold it in fourths, and what I will do is pull it across the top. And if you're lucky, this thing will come off in one nice even motion. And this one did not, so you just go here. And I'll take my butter knife one more time. Yeah, we got a little bit of a mess here. Okay. And we'll get underneath that one. And we'll get that right down there. And that'll pull the rest of that membrane off. So that was pretty nice, actually. 2 pieces. Now there is some fat down in here and some fat pockets, and we'll just kind of trim those up. Because what you want is a lot of nice meat showing. So all of your spices and rubs get down in that meat as it's waiting to go on the smoker. So we'll get most of these fat pockets off of here. Yeah, don't be too worried if you don't get it all off of there. It'll all taste good anyway. Okay. Now typically on the top side of the ribs, what we'll have, and this is a good looking rack, we've got a little bit of fat striations through here in the meat. We're going to leave all that on there because most of that will render away as you're smoking. But we do have this meat over here. You can see a lot of guys call this the undesirable meat, or the alien meat is what I've heard a couple of guys talk about. But we're going to go ahead and take that nice fat pocket off of there. That way you get spice right on top of that meat. Okay. And then this is a little slimy. Once you get that off of there, and I take that off there too. Just get rid of it all. Okay. Okay. So there you have it. A nice rack of spare ribs ready to go on the smoker. So now we're on our second rack of ribs. We've already trimmed the edges and trimmed the ends up on these. So we're going to work on the membrane of this rack and see how easy this one comes off. So we just take our butter knife and we slide it all the way across. Nice and easy. And get this piece out. Then we get our paper towel. We kind of pull it. Oh boy, this is a nice one. We got a nice one here. Okay, so this one is coming off really nice. So basically what you see is the membrane coming away from the bones and the meat. And that one came off very nice. Now, there's another membrane that's very, very small down here. You do not want to peel that membrane off. This is where your rub is going to stick, and this is what holds your meat and your bones together. As you cook, all this small membrane in here is going to kind of break apart, and this is at the point where if you cook your ribs too long, the whole bone will fall apart and you'll have a very overdone rib. So just the one membrane, and this is what you should have, is a nice set of spare rib right there. And we'll go ahead and pull that little piece of meat off of here. All right. And now we are ready for a beautiful rack of St. Louis ribs that are ready to be rubbed. We got the smoker on right now. We're all real excited. It's a Sunday afternoon. We're going to go do some smoking. Okay, now that we've got a couple of nice spare ribs here that have now been cut into St. Louis style ribs, we want to throw a little rub on these bad boys. But in order to start that, I like to start with that little flap of meat we had taken off earlier It kind of gets your hand going so you have a nice technique when you start rubbing these ribs down. So what we'll do is I typically will take my glove off my right hand, and that way it tells me not to contaminate my rub jars or anything like that. So I always keep my dirty hand and my clean hand. My clean hand's always on the right because I'm right-handed. Also, a little thing you'll notice here is on my rub, I've got some pretty big chunks in my rub, so I like to use a nice sifter that's big on this thing. It helps the rub get out and get going across the meat. It's a side-to-side motion, and we'll just take it straight across here, and you'll start getting that nice action across this. And I'll go once and back. Same thing here, once and back. And remember, after about 2 hours, this will be done, be ready to eat, and I guarantee this will be the best piece of meat you've had all day. So you'll take your first set of St. Louis, face down. You always want to do the backs of them first because we're going to cook them with the meat side up, which is the meat side up here. So we don't want to rub the rub off of the meat when we turn this thing over. So I like to start around the edges and just do a pat motion all the way around the edge of these, because you want rub on every bit of your ribs. Every single bite gets flavor. Then I'll come up to the front here. Same scenario. I'll go down once, and then we'll go back and just hit the little spots that we miss. You can always see them in there. Every bite counts. So take this, flip that over. And there is such a thing as getting too much rub on your ribs. You ever have a real salty rib, extra salty, too much smoke is bad. There are some things out there that you really got to watch. When you're doing your pork shoulders and your briskets, don't be afraid to add double of what we've done today. But for your ribs, you want a nice even dusting back and forth. And I'll just hit the little spots that I missed. Okay, that's a good looking wrap. There are great guys out there, Rub Company, Cimarron Docks, Smokin Guns, Bad Byrons. There's a whole bunch of guys out there that got a lot of good rubs, guys. So don't be afraid to try any rub that's out there. And also, don't be afraid to take a recipe off the web and make your own rub, because I guarantee you're going to like it.